That one felt good. No problems there. Didn't have a twinge. Didn't have any those things we've been talking about for a while there. Just able to get it out. Nice cleansing, greetings type thing there. Got it done. That's all well and good now. Come on in, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's the Weekly Trim with yours, Beardly, the one and only Redbeard. Or at least the only guy who calls himself Redbeard for the next 10 square miles or so. Maybe less. Depends on where you live. You might have a friendly neighborhood Redbearded somewhere in your part of the world. You very well could. There's been a lot of people who could claim this thing to fame if they wanted to. And I think I've told the story before at some point in one of the videos that I made in the past about where I came up with the name Redbeard. It's one of those things where it's a funny little story. It's nothing that is all that epic or whatever. It's one of those things where people ask, well, is it just because you have a red beard, which these days has got more gray in it than red, unfortunately. But people ask me occasionally, well, where did the name come from? Was it anything other than just the fact that you can grow red hair on your face? It kind of is. There was an interview done a long time ago with Triple H, to where he was just talking about his coming up through the business and whatnot, that being, of course, the professional wrestling business. And someone asked him, well, where did the name Hunter Hearst Helmsley come from? And it was very interesting to hear his reaction in talking about how at the point in time of the professional wrestling industry where he came into it, he said very eloquently, you had to be something like a clown or a pirate to get over. And that was the honest to God's truth, because when he came in, you had guys like Doink and Duke the Dumpster Drosy and Big Boss Man. You think of all these prolific characters that were out there that had some tie to an occupation in some way, shape, or form, or just some kind of activity. That was the way people got over, or at least that was the way people were presented in some way, shape, or form as these characters that we all got to know and love. So in my mind, I was at a point where I needed to come up with a pen name, because I was doing stuff for a local promotion back home in Lancaster, South Carolina, and I said, well, I needed a name for myself other than just Robert J. Truesdale. I wanted to come up with something that I could be not really known for, but that I could use as kind of a pen name. And I was just sitting around, and I heard that interview with Triple H where he was talking about, you had to be a clown or a pirate. And I thought, pirate, Redbeard, that's not too bad. I can go with that. And stuck with it ever since. So that's where the name Redbeard came from, realistically. Not just because the fluff on the old chin here happens to somewhat be red, although like I say, it's kind of getting gray these days. It just, I get older. We get older. I'm 40 years old, for crying out loud. I got a wife and a kid, a job, all this other stuff, bills. Oh, God. And just stuff that leads to things turning gray when you get old. What can I say? I got a hip that is killing me. I had, as we've talked before, I had a hole in my gut earlier this year. Both of my knees are kind of shot. It just, yeah, it is what it is. But at any rate, had to put that in there. Always get off on a tangent when I first open these shows. Seems like that's where we went today. It's just a natural, free-flowing conversation we're having on here. But this is the September 7th, 2020 edition of the program, and we certainly appreciate you guys tuning in and hanging out with us here on the Weekly Trim podcast as part of the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel, also on Anchor.fm and numerous other podcast hosting facilities that are out there on the old interwebs. We appreciate you no matter what device or what means you may have found yourself here listening to us. We're just glad to have you. We're glad to have you participating in what we're trying to do with this program and with our various online facilities, period. Whether you be looking at us through Facebook, YouTube, Anchor.fm, whatever it is, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that nonsense that us as YouTubers and social media types are supposed to beg you for. We're just glad that you're here. We're glad you're having fun, or we hope you're having fun, and that you're involved with what we're doing here as part of the program. But as I said, this is the September 7th, 2020 edition of the program. This is, of course, the Labor Day edition of the program. Labor Day, people sometimes wonder, well, what the heck is Labor Day? And why do we celebrate labor? Well, the truth of the matter is that if you're not aware, Labor Day, and I'm going to read this off, oddly enough, the Department of Labor website, Labor Day, what it means. Labor Day, the first Monday in September, is a creation of the labor movement and is dedicated to the social and economic achievements of American workers. It constitutes a yearly national tribute to the contributions. That's kind of a tongue twister. It constitutes a yearly national tribute to the contributions workers have made to the strength, prosperity, and well-being of our country. And basically, it's celebrating the fact that we are, as a country, we're workers. The American people are pretty much well known, I'd say worldwide, for being engaged in our occupations very heavily. You know, when you look at things around the world, in terms of the amount of time we spend either at our workplace or engaged in work, I think we're pretty much top of the heap. You know, most other countries, you look at some of the European models and whatnot in terms of the way they do things, you don't see a 40-hour week like we do here. You know, some people, a 40-hour week in this country is sort of, you know, a vacation almost, because Lord knows I know some people who put in 50, 60 hours a week. And that's, you know, that's a tribute to them. Because really and truly, that's just an effort towards trying to improve your own bottom line. That's really what it amounts to. Because if you're working that hard, I would hope that you're earning more money, and I would hope that you're, you know, really getting the respect of the people that you're surrounded by. But, you know, in terms of the description there, and talking about this being a part of the labor movement, Labor Day does have some ties to things like, I started to say organized crime, but that's not really what it is. It has ties to unions and that kind of thing. Not everybody has ever been involved in a union. I never have been. But Lord knows that those things have done good for, you know, a lot of people over the years. They've sort of increased representation and done good things for voters' rights, for laborers' rights. And you can tell the time of year we're in because I'm thinking about voters' rights. But it has done a lot of good over the years, the labor movement, that is. And why do we celebrate Labor Day? Well, why not? As we said, we are a country of laborers and a country of people who are in times sort of obsessed by our jobs or obsessed with our jobs. And I'll be perfectly honest in saying there have been times where I've spent too much time at the office doing things that, you know, could I get done during a regular shift and whatnot? Probably, but it just winds up being such that it's sort of convenient to be there and to get it done maybe after hours. Gosh knows I go in on weekends sometimes and do things. But in my line of work, it is often easier to do things when people aren't around. Information technology being what it is, it is more simple a lot of the time to do things like upgrades and patches and whatnot when no one's on your network. So for my line of work especially, I turn in a 40-hour time card every week, even though I'm a salaried individual. I probably put in closer to 50, 55 hours a week, somewhere in there. And I don't think that's uncommon for a lot of people, especially when you get to a point where, like I am in my career, where you have a bit more responsibility than just a typical rank and file type person who's going to come in, punch the clock, and go home at the end of the day and not carry anything home with them. And that's not tooting my own horn. It's just to say, hey, some people do work harder than others. And the whole thing here this year about the, I'll say, celebration of laborers is especially poignant in 2020. Because guess what? We've had a whole group of people who have really gone above and beyond in terms of keeping things running and just keeping any type of movement and momentum to the economy, period, and what we have now dubbed essential workers. And Lord knows those folks really deserve all the credit in the world. And I'm going to put myself in that category as well, because God knows when things went sideways, where was I? I was working for the most part. I was working immediately after having had major surgery, no less. So there's a lot of people in this country, myself and my wife and a lot of other people that I could name off the top of my head, who are all included in this category of essentials, who really this year, more so than any other before now, really and truly have earned the opportunity to be celebrated and to be respected in the form of a national holiday. So, I really am to a point here now, and if you hear click-clacking throughout this recording, my wonderful compatriot here, my dog Roddy, is treating me to some tap dancing while he's moving around in our studio here. But in looking at everybody who's been involved in things this year, it's really been something else. It's really been, I'll say, a moment of retrospect and a moment of just sort of analysis, because you see not only who has been involved in things, but who's been willing to be involved in things. Because God knows when everything went sideways, there were people who really and truly, they had every reason in the world to stay home. They had every reason to not come out and to be involved in things. People with children, people who had families who maybe had been taking care of older loved ones and whatnot. All those folks who came out anyway and did their jobs regardless. Just a tremendous amount of respect for every single one of them. It didn't matter if it was someone who was working in a restaurant or a warehouse operation, making sure shipments were on time. You think of all the crap that people bought up because they thought, oh, we're going to hell. We're not going to have TP. We're not going to have toilet paper or all these other stuff that we think we need. Come on. All that stuff that you guys bought up and that now there's in some cases surplus amounts of, you can all go to hell. That was a terrible, terrible example of humanity. When you went out there and you bought all that crap. You gave people a reason to continue to work, I'll give you that much. But was it necessary? No. Really and truly, no. And I've said before, too, when we got into this whole thing, if you came down to it, guess what? If you took a dump and then you had to wash your ass by getting into the shower, guess what? You're going to be fine. It might not be ideal, sure, but guess what? You survived. You got a clean butt. You don't have poopy on you. Hey, you're fine. You're not sick. So what? You didn't use toilet paper. Use some water and some soap. Hey, that's good for you. But, all these people who were involved in the essentials movement and just did things above and beyond this year especially, I think they deserve the day off. And probably more than that. I'd say a lot of them would probably tell you, well, can you give me a check instead of just a day off? Can we get a little of that stimulus money that we've been talking about here for a couple of weeks, months, or whatever, that hasn't really panned out again? Something along those lines to show appreciation. Just a day off, that's cool. But some money would be nice, too. That way I can, put my kids who are now returning to school in some way, shape, or form into some fresh clothes, and I can buy them some new shoes or whatever. It is what it is. I think a lot of people might sooner have, money as opposed to a day off, because that's, what does Labor Day amount to being for most people? It's road trips. God knows it's an inordinate number of hours, in some cases, spent in a car driving from point A to point B. It's cookouts, maybe. But for the most part, it's time spent in sweltering heat because this time of year usually is very, very hot. Today, I will say, has been somewhat, not mild. Mild is the wrong word, but it's been, I'll say maybe temperate is the better term to use there. Because here in the South, I talked in the past couple of weeks here about how hot it's been. Today it was in the mid 80s. So not that bad, realistically. Still warm, but not, 115 in the shade, which it's been in the past this time of year. So, this day usually for a lot of people is in some way, shape, or form a vacation period because you've got an extra day to work with there. You could have taken maybe Friday off as well as some annual leave, personal time. And then you wind up with a 4-day weekend where you have, 2 days of travel, essentially, 2 days to enjoy yourself. And hey, then Tuesday comes around and you're back in whatever hell you happen to be when it comes to your job. But, for us this year, we stayed home. My wife and I, we had planned a long time ago for this to be sort of a Florida weekend for us because we do enjoy going down to the theme parks. But with the state of things being what they are, and I should say this as well, we usually do something in terms of traveling or vacationing because my wife's birthday is September 2nd. And usually, the timing of one and the other between her birthday and Labor Day gives us a chance to say, oh, well, this is Jill's birthday trip. Ha ha, we're going to go for a birthday trip. Yay. I never get a birthday trip. I never get to do shit on my birthday. I get like a card or maybe a box of chocolate, and that's it. Oh, there you go. There's your birthday, Robert. My birthday, you know what my birthday is? My birthday was the day Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. My birthday should be the one that's celebrated as a national holiday. Labor Day can be a national holiday as well, but come on. Guys landed on a foreign a planet out there, or not a planet, but he landed on the moon for crying out loud. That deserves some celebration. I deserve some kind of national holiday on my birthday as well, so we can take a trip somewhere. That'd be nice. Well, no, not really, because it'd have to be somewhere cold, because God knows July is hot enough for you to be able to fry an egg on your windshield. But, this year we had planned to go somewhere. We were going to be going to, I believe, if I remember correctly, we had booked a couple days at the one of the Universal Orlando properties we were going to be staying at. And this year, with everything just suddenly having gone sideways with the industry down there as far as the theme parks is concerned, you still have business happening down there, but so much has changed in terms of having to wear masks. All the characters are 20 feet away from you. It's very different right now. It's good in terms of sort of the distancing that's happening and the fact that there's not as many people there. Although from what I've been reading the past 24 hours, some of those theme parks did reach capacity, so there's that. It's not like they're full-scale capacity either. They've limited things to about 35% of what they can actually handle, so it's not as though there's 50,000 people there. It's just, it's much less than that, but still, you had a lot of people down there. And between all that, with the differences in where things were and where they are now, we just said, you know what, we'll stay home. We'll do something some other time, maybe in 4 or 5 months from now when stuff has changed. Maybe we'll try again at that point in time. Because guess what? The news this week, I don't know if you've been paying attention, because Lord knows I've all but stopped watching the evening news, is they're talking about vaccines. Vaccines for COVID-19. And they're quick, they're almost, they're fast tracking these things. They're almost thinking they've got some very promising news on a couple of them. Russia and China, they all think they've got something, and then you have companies like Pfizer and whatever else over here in this country who are teaming with all sorts of research labs trying to get something churned out to where we can have a vaccine maybe in time for October or maybe November. Guess what? November 5th, maybe? We have a vaccine November 5th? Wouldn't that be odd? Wouldn't that be timely? I saw that news and I'm like, okay, well, what's the the real turnaround with this stuff? We've tested this for how long on humans? Did we see any of them possibly grow a third eyeball? or the third whatever? No? Okay. Well, how about 10 years from now? Can we verify that there won't be something else that goes on there? I know I'm getting off on a tangent again, but really and truly, this is the kind of thing that we have to talk about and discuss, because when you're talking about vaccines, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I fully understand and appreciate things like vaccines. I'm just saying this one is new. We don't know anything about it yet. So should we really push people towards having to have it? Maybe not, but this is the comment that I've heard other people say is that this is something that shows up online. I shouldn't say other people, but it's one of those deals to where you really should think about the notion of, okay, if the vaccine winds up having a 2.5% mortality rate and the disease has a 1% mortality rate, what should we really be doing here? Yeah, that's something to think about there too, folks. It may be less dangerous to go one route than the other. I'm just saying. Sometimes you walk out on your front porch or on your way to your car and you get hit by a truck. Some days you go to work and you're just fine. It's one or the other. We're all going to die at some point. It's just a matter of when and how. You're welcome to make your own decision, but I think I'm probably going to wait a little while in terms of seeing which direction things go here. I don't know that it's really going to be worth it in terms of investing my health in something that's just been churned up here within the past 5 or 6 months. But now that we've fully gotten away from talking about Labor Day, let's go ahead and take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes to get into some wrestle talk about All Elite Wrestling's All Out pay-per-view. Stay tuned, folks. Be back in a few.
I walk alone.
Welcome back, gang. Appreciate you continuing to hang out with us here on this episode of the Weekly Trim Podcast. I'm your host, Redbeard, and we just want to continue to show appreciation for those of you who have been hanging out with us for a long time here on the YouTube channel, or if you're new to us by virtue of Anchor.fm, or whatever means you're hearing the show. We appreciate you, and just want to let you know that we are glad to have you. Now, talking some wrestling. You know, I've said before, I didn't want to make this show a whole lot of wrestling-heavy conversation, but it seems like the past couple of weeks here, with the proliferation of how many events we've had to talk about, it just, made sense to talk about them. So this past weekend here, we had the 2020 edition of All Elite Wrestling's All Out pay-per-view, which was sort of the second half of the All In concept, to where, Cody and the Young Bucks, they had bought in to the whole idea of, we're going into this company with All Elite Wrestling, we're putting our necks on the line, our own careers on the line, and we're going to invest in this thing, and we're going to show how much it means to all of us and whatnot. So the buyout, or excuse me, I shouldn't say the buyout's part of the pre-show and whatnot. The All Out pay-per-view was sort of the second half of that kind of thing. And really and truly, this is the second iteration of the All Out show, and I don't want to say that this show was frustrating, but it in a lot of ways was. Because really and truly, something that AEW really excels at, and I will give them all the credit in the world for this, is they've gotten really good at creating these angles and storylines that they're hooking you in. They're really bringing you into the forefront here, and they're bringing you to a point to where you want to see what happens with these things. I will fully admit that I was on the fence about plunking down my hard-earned cash for this thing, because this is not like the WWE Network. This is still a traditional pay-per-view, to where when you want to view this thing, guess what? It's going to cost you $50. So yeah, I paid $50 to watch this thing. So I think I can, have my opinion of whether or not this was a good or bad show. But as I mentioned, what AEW does so well is the build in creating these storylines and angles that are just incredibly interesting and really thought-provoking in a lot of ways. And just, they're to a point where the talent succeeds so much in making you want to see how these things play out. And that's the mark of a successful professional wrestling promotion, period, is to say, hey, we've created this drama. We've created this set of scenarios where people want to see what the ultimate payoff is. And that's storytelling. And it's a great thing, because so much of what people have found lacking in WWE over recent history has been, a real void in terms of the storytelling aspect of things. People just felt for years now that the real problem with WWE, and with other promotions as well, not just them, is the fact that they don't have anything to really let people sink their teeth into in terms of stories. It's just kind of they're having matches, more or less. And that I would say that's true for the most part, because they've gotten away from really having these sort of long, slow burn type narratives and whatnot, and they've just gone towards really quick payoff type things. Why? I have no idea. Maybe the talent is different. Maybe the style of production is different. Who knows? It's been very frustrating as a fan to not have what you sort of appreciated forever in terms of the storylines and the notion that, hey, this is going to be something that continues on and on and on based on what happens today and tomorrow and what happened 5 or 6 months ago as well. But so in a lot of ways, for me and for other people, the build in terms of AEW's product winds up being greater than the matches that are supposed to be a payoff when you get to a point where you have a show like this. There were so many situations and scenarios that have built towards this show here. Some of them, I will say, were not handled all that well. Some of them, they were handled pretty well. Yeah, there were some good and some bad, but when it was bad, it was real bad, and when it was good, it was mostly good, not as great as it could have been. So let's get into talking about this, and I'll go over the card and I'll give you my impression of each one of these matches here, because Lord knows there was a lot of them. You had an 11-match card total when you include the pre-show and also the actual main card, which it ran for almost 4 hours. So again, $50. I'd say I got my money's worth in terms of actual length of content, but it was like, oh man, this is going to be a long one. Because I think it was, when was it over? It was almost midnight by the time the show was over. So again, it started at 8 p.m. That's probably part of the reason why some of the WWE events, especially the big ones like WrestleMania and whatnot, they have them starting around 5 or 6 in the afternoon, because they're going to be long. They're going to have all this stuff in there, so they don't want people passing out because of the fact they had to stay up after 11 o'clock at night. But, the first 2 matches here were part of the pre-show. Joey Janela with Sonny Kiss defeated Serpentico. And this is, I'll say this is a match that had some real reaching ties to our part of the world, because Joey Janela, long time ago, he was a PWX guy. This is before PWX was PWX, but Joey Janela was part of a little faction there in what was, the early company that became PWX. Along with Rhett Titus and I can't remember the other guy's name, Corey Havoc maybe? That might have been who he was, but he was involved with that little group there. And now, of course, he's known, I'll say, throughout the entire wrestling world. Serpentico is also a guy who spent a lot of time in the Carolinas, again with PWX and other companies as well. So to see the two of them in this moment here was pretty interesting. There was a moment in the match where just something happened. I don't know what really transpired, but you can see Serpentico trying to get things figured out with Rick Knox, the referee. Something happened in there where they weren't quite on sync with the time marks or the time cues, to where something happened and the match kind of fell apart at that point in time. It's a very noticeable moment in there where you can tell that Serpentico is... he's going back and forth with Knox saying, okay, what are we supposed to be doing? And it fell apart at that moment in time. Not a terrible match, not a great match. It is what it is. Moving on from there, tag team match, kind of a throwaway thing here where you're just, you're trying to build sort of the undercard aspect of the tag team division, where you have Private Party, Isaiah Cassidy, and Mark Queen defeating 2 members of the Dark Order in Alex Reynolds and John Silver. I don't know why they make Reynolds and Silver come out without their masks and then they put the hoods on whenever they get in the ring. Like, is there a point to that? Stu Grayson gets to, he gets to work without his mask, but then these guys all have to put on the masks whenever they get in the ring. I don't understand that at all. But Private Party, they wind up winning the match there again, just sort of a move to them being maybe getting bumped up in the tag team division so they can be thought of a bit more highly than what they already are. The first match that was on the main part of the card, I was hoping that this would not be on the pre-show just because of the fact that I felt it deserved more of a opportunity to be a thing that was appreciated, because you knew going into it that it was going to be one of these cinematic style matches that have become sort of the flavor of the week when it comes to pro wrestling pay-per-views and whatnot. And this one, again, has some ties to the Carolinas, because you've got Big Swole, who, if you don't know her other name, she was known at one point in time as Ariel Monroe. She is the significant other of Cedric Alexander, real-life wife of Cedric Alexander. Beautiful couple, their child there, fantastic group. Big-time respect for the both of them in pursuing their careers and for doing great things in 2 different companies. But it was a cinematic-style match between her and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. You had Rebel, who, of course, at one point in time was part of the TNA roster. And this match here, it was really cool for what it was, because you had Swole showing up at Dr. Baker's actual practice, because she's an actual legitimate dentist. People don't always believe that, but she is an actual dentist. And they're fighting through her offices. And, the crazy scenario, and again, this is only something that they could pull off in one of these cinematic style matches, was towards the end, you had usage of, and I think they kind of foreshadowed this significantly in terms of the commentary that was going on during the match, but you had this, I'm kind of jumping around here, but you had this moment that nobody's really talked about, I don't think, in terms of other commentary about this whole show, but something that in my mind was like, oh my God, they're actually doing that. And you had Dr. Baker pull out a hypodermic needle, a syringe, and on the commentary they're talking about, oh, what is that? Is it Novocaine? Is it lidocaine? She's going to knock her out, that kind of thing. And they're fighting over the syringe, and it ultimately winds up to where Swole gets control of it and pops Dr. Baker in the thigh with this thing. Like, legit, it's a needle and it's in her thigh. And I'm like, oh my God, we've now gotten to a point where we're no longer using thumbtacks, we're using actual effing syringes. And in my mind, I'm like, God, we don't need to go that far. We don't need to employ that kind of thing. You know, in this scenario, in this situation, it made sense. I will give credit where credit is due. It was something that, you know, it made sense in this situation. But please, I really don't want to wind up seeing that being a consistent or normal part of things ever really in wrestling. But the finish came when, you know, not only did Swole wind up numbing Dr. Baker's leg, she then kind of gets her to a point where she's got her held down on one of the examination chairs there, and she straps her down with one of the laughing gas masks there and just knocks her out. That was a pretty inventive and clever thing there. But I think the commentary crew kind of spoiled things because they start talking about giving her some Novocaine, giving her some laughing gas. And it winds up being that's the finish. So they kind of tease things there and kind of spoiled as well. But moving from there, you had the first of several tag team matches that were on the card here. The Young Bucks defeating the Jurassic Express. Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus. Marco Stunt was out there with them at ringside. This was a fun match. You're starting to see the return, I'll say, of the Young Bucks to what they were when they were really making strides as part of the Bullet Club in Japan with New Japan Pro Wrestling and whatnot. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it gets accepted or whatever in this country. Are they going to be looked upon as baby faces as they are now, or how are people going to take this in this part of the world? So we'll have to see. I'm still a big fan of Luchasaurus. I think that the Jurassic Express as a whole, they really need a movie or a comic book tie-in or something like that. I love their theme music. I love the visual of those guys. Marco Stunt, I think they probably could do without him and it just be Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus. He's kind of a hanger-on right now. I know he's hurt, but he's kind of a hanger-on, but whatever. From there, this was the big kind of car crash. Well, there were two big car crashes here on this card. You had the 21-man Casino Battle Royale, where the winner receives a future shot at the AEW World Championship. Lance Archer, the Murder Hawk, eventually was the winner of the match. It came down to him and Eddie Kingston. The finish was very weird because you have the two of them kind of teetering on the corner of one of the parts of the apron there, and Jake Roberts, they were talking about, he's out there with that bag. He's got the bag with the snake and whatnot, and he kind of starts hitting Kingston with the bag, and it's like, what is going on here? What is he doing? And it just visually it didn't make sense. And this wasn't the only time that happened during this show, but the finish. It was not satisfying in the least, and it didn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. But, it is what it is. I think Lance Archer was thought of as the heir apparent when it came into this match, and he, of course, won. The concept of this match is interesting to me because it's different from a typical battle royale to where you have groups of 5 competitors coming to the ring at once, and then whoever has, quote-unquote, drawn the Joker card winds up being that last entrant to get sort of the, we're normally like in the Royal Rumble, whoever draws number 30 is thought of to have a natural advantage. Well, in this case, Lance Archer drew that Joker card, and he was the last one out there. So not only was he the favorite going in, he also had that to his advantage there as well. But he had a moment in that match there where Matt Sydal, if you don't remember him from his WWE days, just look up the name Matt Sydal and you'll know who I'm talking about. But he made his debut during this match here, and he was going to come out and apparently try and make the big-time splash in things by going for a shooting star press. Gets up there on the top rope. Well, guess what? Foot's wet. If he slips, damn near breaks his neck. And as soon as it happened, I cringed, my butthole puckered, and I was like, oh, God, please let him be okay. Because he came down in such a way that his neck seemed to have hit one of the ropes very dramatically and violently. But he was fine. He got up and kept going. But in that moment, you had just a total ruination of what was really going to be a spectacular occasion to where he made his entry into this company. And he's been gone for a while. People have seen him on the indies and in parts of the business in other parts of the world and whatnot. But he was going to make a big time splash here and coming into AEW. Instead, he's going to be on Botchamania next week. So it is what it is. But Lance Archer, I will say he's the new number one contender, but he at least will get a title shot at some point in the future there for the AEW World Championship as a result of that win. Now, here's the one where people really they've raked AEW over the coals over this, and I will say that they've done so very righteously. And it's hard to even really talk about because it was a very scary match and very scary situation. The match we're talking about, of course, was the Broken Rules match where Matt Hardy was taking on Sammy Guevara. And the concept behind this was that it's a sort of another, not a cinematic style match, but it's another one of these matches where they've had in the past where by virtue of them being in the confines of the stadiums and whatnot that Tony Khan and his family happen to own, they're able to wander around like the football stadium where the Jacksonville Jaguars play. And this was going to be another situation like that, where Sammy and Matt just sort of, it was going to be a garbage match. It just happened to be a bigger stage than what you normally see. So at one point, after the match had really only just gotten going, Sammy and Matt get up onto this kind of scissor lift type thing. And you can tell, okay, well, this is going to be a situation where, all right, they're going to take a bump off the top of this damn thing. Sure enough, it was a spot where I think Sammy went for like a spear or something, and he was going to propel the both of them off of the scissor lift onto a set of tables that were down below. And, of course, the tables are there to cushion their fall. They're there to, in some way, shape, or form, protect those guys. But they had a little bit too much momentum, went a little bit too far forward, and the scariest thing in the world happens to where Matt, being the guy whose back is to the ground, winds up hitting his head directly onto the concrete below. And I've seen some scary things in wrestling. This was one of the scariest ones because when he landed, you could tell immediately he's knocked out and dead cold knocked out. And what made it even scarier was Matt's hair. He has this hair to where he's got jet black hair to begin with, but then he's got some parts of it that he's dyed red. So by virtue of the color of his hair and just the sort of lighting and the shadows, I was really hoping that what I was seeing was not like a puddle of blood coming from the back of this man's skull, but it wound up being just his hair. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, thank God, at least he's not busted his skull wide open. But he had clearly suffered a brain injury because the referee she was trying to get the match stopped. But the thing about the scenario with this match was such that if Matt lost, he was going to be removed from the company. He had agreed to quit AEW if he lost this match. Of course, it's kayfabe, that's a storyline type thing. So in this situation they were suddenly thrust into with him being hurt, they have to call the match, and technically, if you can't continue, you're sort of the loser in a wrestling match of this nature. And that clearly was not supposed to be the finish. So things continue, and it's looking as though, Matt's going to be taken away for medical attention, and then no, he's not. He kind of, there's a doctor there, there's someone there trying to look after him to see, okay, all right, is he okay? Can he continue? Do we need to get an ambulance here? Whatever. And Sammy's just kind of, floating around. He's clearly waiting for somebody to tell him, all right, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing next. And he starts to make his way towards the ring. And the camera crew is still following him. And you had this moment in the match where, like at the very beginning, Matt delivers a line along the lines of talking about, I will delete you type thing. Well, he said that at the start of the match. He gets up from having his skull, I'll say, thumped, and he does that same line again. So if you couldn't tell before that he was severely concussed, that ought to have been your only clue that something was wrong with the man. The fact that in his mind, he's suddenly at the start of this match again. So it's really, you wonder, because on commentary later on in the show, they talked about, he was not medically cleared, but he was cleared by the doctor in terms of being able to compete, quote unquote. They tried to explain it away in one shape or another to say, okay, well, we did the right thing by letting him come back out. I think that's bullshit. He should never have been allowed to come back out. But he did. He did anyway. And they finished the match. The scenario of the finish was both of them climbed up onto part of a tower that's part of the production there, to where they have some of the lighting and whatnot on it. They climbed up this thing about 15 feet or whatnot. Matt punches Sammy at one point in time. Sammy falls off, and it's a 10 count because of the fact that Sammy falls through some tables. That was the finish. Not at all the match that they had hoped to have, I'm sure, but that's what it wound up being. And that was the finish that they apparently were aiming towards all along. Just, again, it had nothing to it in terms of drama because of the fact that Matt was hurt severely. He shouldn't have been allowed to continue. He should have been taken out. I'm really hoping he's fine. Matt and Jeff both, they've absorbed so much punishment over the years. I'm talking about, of course, the Hardy Boys. You think about all the tables they've been through, all the chair shots they've taken, all this stuff that they've done. They're tough as hell. But still, something like that where, a human skull against concrete from a 15-foot drop, that's not something that people can just ordinarily survive. So I'm hoping he's okay. I continue to talk about, in talking to, young wrestlers around here in this part of the world, think of your quality of life. Think of what you want to be doing when you're 40 and 50 years old. And then decide whether or not you want to do those jumps and dives and this, that, and the other. Because it just, in a lot of cases, is not worth it. And in the case of Hardy there, I hope he's fine. I'm hoping he's going to be okay, but it really looked scary there. Next up, you had an interesting contest in the form of the Women's Championship match. The AEW Women's Champion Hikaru Shida taking on the NWA World Women's Championship, or World Women's Champion, I should say, Thunder Rosa. A very interesting match from that concept. You have sort of an inter-promotional thing going on there. Shida did win, did retain her title. Would have been interesting to see Thunder Rosa get both titles. I didn't think it was going to happen just because I think NWA is just at this point really desperate to have anything going their way because Lord knows they've lost every bit of momentum they had. In not being able to record and not being able to do anything at all in terms of maintaining the relevance of their product. I mean, they've lost Wade Barrett as well because Wade had come in as sort of a replacement for Jim Cornette at one point during their commentary booth there, and now Barrett is back with WWE doing commentary for NXT, so they've also lost that. But still, I would have been very impressed to see Thunder Rosa win, but just not in the cards. Still a hell of an athlete, hell of a wrestler, both of those two ladies are, so kudos to both of them for really highlighting what women's wrestling can be on a show like this. One of my favorite matches from this entire show was the next one on the card, and that was the 8-man tag team match between the Dark Order and the I won't call them the Nightmare Family, but they were sort of, the Nightmare Family plus two, in that you had the Natural Nightmares, that being Dustin Rhodes and QT Marshall, tagging with Matt Cardona, who, if you don't know who Matt Cardona is, it used to be Zack Ryder in WWE, and Scorpio Sky, taking on, like we mentioned, the Dark Order. That was Mr. Brody Lee, Colt Cabana, Evil Uno, and Stu Grayson. Very fun match. A lot of stuff going on here, storyline-wise, that continued on throughout this whole thing. I was really impressed with the way they put it all together. It was, a very fast-paced match, if I can say that correctly. And it all made sense. It all continued on to progress the feud between the Rhodes family and the Dark Order. You had the Nightmare Family, come off as the winners here, but it didn't wind up sort of destroying any momentum that the Dark Order had coming into this, because they're still a very interesting group. You've got a lot of continuation of feuds and things going on there that they'll continue to proliferate. They'll continue to be interesting as we move forward, because they announced after the match was over that Dustin Rhodes will be taking on Mr. Brody Lee this coming Wednesday on AEW Dynamite for the TNT Championship. So you've got that sort of continuing to feed into the feud between the Rhodes and the Dark Order there. But you also got, the idea of Colt Cabana kind of being this unwilling participant in the Dark Order. And now that there's been a chink in the armor exposed to where, he had this set up at the end of the match where Brody Lee had kind of given him, all right, here's your opportunity to win the match for us. He goes for another big spot, winds up missing, I think it was a moonsault off the top rope there, and they lose the match based on the fact that he could not get the pinfall. So you have, again, that little chink in there to where they've now fit into a potential plot point of, Mr. Brody Lee and Colt Cabana not getting along anymore. So it's just little stuff like that that continues to build these storylines and make all these characters interesting. So that was a very fun match, one of my favorites for this entire card here. And, the big one I think that a lot of people were really looking forward to, other than the championship match, was the tag team championship match. That being between FTR, Cash Wheeler, and Dax Harwood against Kenny Omega and Adam Page. Of course, Omega and Page coming into this were the champions. And you have a title change. I don't think that surprised anybody. I think everybody was under the impression, okay, when this match is over and done with, Omega and Page are going to start to split ties. This is going to be the wedge that gets driven, of course, between Adam Page and the rest of the Elite. Also could maybe wind up being a split between Omega and the Young Bucks in terms of their relationship. This match was interesting because of the fact that it seemed like it was really, it was paced in such a way that there was not really I'll say a beginning, a middle, and an end. This felt like it was just a constant thing. It didn't feel like it had that ebb and flow to a natural story, to where you have the introduction, you have this crescendo that builds towards some moment, and then you have that bang type thing that happens, and then you have the sort of opportunity to come down from where you were in terms of being on that ha, and that's part of storytelling, period. But this match didn't really have that. It was kind of one note throughout the entire thing. Not bad in terms of the performances by anyone involved, because God knows all four of these guys are tremendous athletes. Wheeler and Harwood, of course, they're old Page as well. They're Mid-Atlantic guys. I've watched all three of them for years as part of various promotions around the Carolinas. But ultimately, you had the situation here where FTR, of course, are the winners, and they are going to move on in terms of their career as it being one of the most prolific tag teams ever. I think, what was the statistic I read? They're the first team to have won the NXT, Raw, SmackDown, and AEW tag team championships. I think at some point it would be interesting if they could also go for the NWA World Tag Team Championships, just to have that in there as their maybe final comeuppance. Impact and their tag team championship, no, don't worry about that one. Just NWA, that might be curious to see in there. But again, that match just seemed very one note, and it seemed almost as if it was more of a moment geared towards severing or splitting up Omega, Page, and the Young Bucks more than it was anything else. So it was a means to an end in terms of getting the belts off of Omega and Page, and doing whatever they're going to do with those guys going forward. So kudos to Cash and Harwood for getting it done there and for bringing the tag team titles back to the Carolinas. Next up, I tell you, you've had a couple of gimmick matches on this card here, and this one was, of course, the most vivid of them all, and the Mimosa Mayhem match. Oh boy. The idea here, of course, being that the only way to win is by either submitting your opponent, getting a pinfall, or tossing them into a giant vat of mimosa. Mimosa, of course, being a mixture of orange juice, representative of freshly squeezed Orange Cassidy, and the champagne there, a little bit of the bubbly, as Chris Jericho has become known for. Fun match. Really well paced, really well thought out in terms of how they had some moments where they were kind of teetering on edge. It's a really fun match from how they had things spaced out there with the teases of them going into the vats and whatnot. You had, Jericho kind of pushing Orange Cassidy's face into these things occasionally, and then you had, I think both of them wound up getting a foot or an arm into the vat. But the concept was you had to fully fall into the vat before you were declared to have been eliminated in the match there. Of course, Jericho winds up going for a swim in one of the vats of mimosa there. So it was a very fun match. Not a very long match, especially can you compare it to the one before there, which I didn't mention this, but it felt like, with the tag team championship match, that those guys got some extra time, maybe, that they might not have had really leading up to the match because of what happened between Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara. So I think that might have been, a situation there as well with that match, because it went right at 30 or 35 minutes. That's a long time for a match these days. But, with the Mimosa Mayhem match, that one was very well contained there and went I'd say flawlessly. Those two really put on a great show and had a very entertaining match between the two of them. The last match that they had, sort of leading up to this one, you had I'll say the botches there where Cassidy tried to hit the dragon screw leg whips on Jericho, and he just kind of flops down, and that was the resounding visual that you had of that match there. This was, I'll say, a correction to all of that. This was a very fun match and a very cool thing as well, but I would love to have seen what they did in terms of creating those vats of quote-unquote mimosa. It was probably something like Tang or whatnot, but still, I would love to have seen how that come together. That would have been pretty cool to me. And, of course, the main event of the evening, Jon Moxley defeating MJF with Wardlow, his sidekick there in tow. This was a prolific match in terms of how it was a traditional wrestling match. Very much, one of these things where MJF showing off his abilities and trying to take apart Moxley's left arm there and whatnot. It was cool in the way that it broke down at the end. The finish, to me, was a prototypical example of how you have a difference in AEW and WWE in terms of them being a wrestling company, whereas WWE is a TV company. And what I mean by that is, and I'll try and explain the finish to the match here if you weren't able to see it for yourself, but the finish involved Wardlow distracting the referee up on the apron, and while he's got the referee distracted, he tosses the AEW diamond ring. I forget what the promotion that was, or excuse me, the gimmick was behind that ring, but it was a ring that MJF won for some kind of tournament that they did. But at any rate, Wardlow tosses the ring to MJF. He, of course, intentionally fumbles it to where it's on the mat, and he and Moxley come face to face, and suddenly he realizes, oh shit, the referee can't see what's going on, and the whole thing going into the match was the agreement that was in the contract to where Moxley couldn't use his double arm DDT, which he calls the paradigm shift. So, of course, referee's not looking. Boom, double arm DDT, Moxley wins. The problem with it was that moment did not get captured as well as it should have. The cameras were not really where they needed to be, and the time was not given to that moment to where it needed to sink in. Like, they needed to spend a few more moments between those two guys face to face to where it was like, oh, this is what's actually going to happen here. Because you have to, in visual storytelling, you have to give the camera a moment to catch up with what you're doing in the ring. And I think they missed that. But that's one of the differences between WWE and AEW, is that with WWE, they would have gotten that right. They would have gotten that moment captured very vividly and very well. With AEW, I think they're still very much growing into the production and editing side of things. They do fine most of the time, but that was just a moment there where, to me, if it had been allowed to dwell for about 10 seconds or so there and really hammer home that visual of Moxley saying, I got you, little son of a bitch, and then him hammering him home with that paradigm shift, it would have been much, much, much more vivid. So, again, not a bad match, not a bad, way of sending off the storyline there between MJF and Moxley, but at the same time, I just felt like it could have been done a little bit better. But, it is what it is. As the whole thing here, it was good, but then it was never really in the great category. There were too many just botches and screw-ups to really consider this as being a great pay-per-view. Was it worth $50? No. My wife is going to have my ass, I'm sure, when she sees our billing statement, and it's like, well, what did you spend $50 on? Why is this on here? It was research, honey. It was research for the show. That's all I can tell you. But there's, in looking online here today, of course, there's a whole bunch of fury over Matt Hardy and his injury and being allowed to continue that match. I really think that they've got a bad PR moment there. They're really going to have to do some digging to get them to a point to where they are not seen as having taken advantage of one of the bigger members of their roster in terms of what he brings to that company. So hopefully Matt's fine, but hopefully that doesn't make too much of a ding on this company as a whole as they move forward from wherever they go from here. So that's the commentary that we have for you on AEW's All Out pay-per-view. And from here, we're going to take another break, and we'll get into talking about some other stuff that we've been watching other than just wrestling. I watch stuff other than wrestling. You know that? I don't just watch wrestling all the time. Yeah. My wife doesn't believe me either. You should. Be back in a few, folks. Stay tuned.
Dear mother, can you hear me whining? It's been 3 whole weeks since then I have left your home. The sudden fear has left me trembling, 'cause now it seems that I am out here on my own, and I'm feeling so alone. Pay attention to the cracked streets and the broken homes. Some call it slum, some call it nice. I want to take you to the wasteland, I want to call my home. Welcome to paradise. Dear mother, can you hear me laughing? It's been 6 whole months since that I have left your home. It makes me wonder why I'm still here. For some strange reason, it's now feeling like my home, and I never wanna go. Pay attention to the cracked streets and the broken homes. Some call it slum, some call it nice. I want to take you to the wasteland, I want to call my home. to paradise. Welcome to paradise. Welcome to paradise.
Welcome back, gang. Thank you for continuing to hang out with us here on the Weekly Trim podcast as part of the old Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. I want to continue to show our appreciation to you, but also if you have not already, please consider subscribing to the channel if you're watching us here on YouTube, but also just showing some love in some way, shape, or form. If you would like, comment, share, or what have you, we'd also appreciate that as well as we continue to try and grow and show off what we're doing here on the old Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube, Anchor FM, whatever we are, association of podcast partners. All right, in being sort of one who's not watched a whole lot of TV throughout I'll say the history of my life and whatnot, it's been really awesome here recently to get into some really cool programs. And of course, this is not stuff on traditional TV. We're talking about stuff that is coming across some of the streaming platforms. And it's a variety of them here. We're not just talking about Amazon Prime or Netflix or any of those. We're talking about stuff that's on a couple of different ones. And, the past week has been pretty cool in that you had some new things come around and I got to catch up on some stuff. And it's going to be, I think, pretty fun moving forward here in terms of continuing to catch up on these series and more, because there's a lot of cool stuff happening right now. But, we have got into The Boys on Amazon Prime late. We did not see the first season until about 2 weeks ago. And I ran through it in, I think, maybe 2 days, just because I really could have watched it all in one day if I wanted to, but it was just one of those things where, you've got work and home life and everything else, so you could only squeeze in so much at one point in time. But The Boys, of course, is about a group of superheroes who are sort of overseen, and I won't get too much into the storyline here, but they're overseen by a company that's trying to put them into cahoots with the military of the United States. And then you've got this other group who are all humans, but they're like former CIA operatives and whatnot. And it winds up that they're trying to undo this corporation because of the fact that one of their members wound up losing a spouse to one of the superheroes. It's a crazy scenario. I can't explain the whole thing. If you want to watch it, I would definitely encourage you to, but it's not something I can really explain all that well in these confines and really get all the nuances that are in there. I just really would, if you're at all a fan of like superheroes and sort of the quasi reverse reality of something like an Elseworlds type deal, to where Superman, instead of being this nice guy, he's an asshole. That's the kind of thing that you're going to see in this show, because there's a character whose name is Homelander, who essentially is Superman as an asshole. and that's what, is sort of the basis for this whole thing, is this concept that these heroes are portrayed as one thing and they're actually something else behind the scenes. So definitely would encourage you to check that one out, especially now that season 2 is around. If you're a subscriber to Amazon Prime and you enjoy stuff of that nature, it's really worth your time. Season 2, the first 3 episodes are out, and it's saying it's more of the same would sound like a dig almost, in saying, okay, well, this is just more what they did before. But it's one of those things where in this condition, having more of the same is just more insanity and more blood, guts, and everything else that you can think of that this series has been founded on. So it's really been something to see how they get into this narrative again and really just pick things up right where season 1 left off, because they've really just jumped back into it with both feet and continued to grow this thing. It's really something else how they have continued to expand this narrative by introducing new characters after losing a few at the end of season 1. Spoiler. And it just, it continues to grow. The narrative continues to just branch out and be this crazy, crazy thing. I really would encourage you to check it out. I know I've said that several times, but I wanted to. I was hoping for the entire season to have been released at one point with this, but I don't know when it sort of happened. That because I think at some point in time, like with some of the Netflix series, they used to put the entire thing out there, and then you could watch it at your leisure. With this, you got 3 episodes, and then say come back on Fridays. We'll release more then. Oh, I wanted the whole thing, damn you. I wanted to be able to watch it all. But, you have to come back and re-engage with their product at that point. So whatever. We'll come back and we'll get more episodes as soon as we can. The other one that I'm really into right now is Lovecraft Country. Love what they're doing here. This show is a great combination of topical retelling of American history, horror, sci-fi, family drama. It's so many little things that are involved here in terms of storytelling aspects, but just really, really awesomely well done. And the horror and the sci-fi elements are bridged by the family drama that exists here. And man, it's so well done. It's a great show. And again, it's not something I can really explain all that much because of how vivid all this thing is. But really, just awesome show. Really worth your time. If you're a subscriber to HBO Max, I know a lot of people, they got into HBO for Game of Thrones. Now they're kind of looking for something else. If you've got a void in your life because of Game of Thrones, get into Lovecraft Country. Get in. If you didn't watch Watchmen, watch Watchmen first, the series that they produced last year. It's worth your time as well. Then get into Lovecraft Country, because both of them are really something else. And part of the HBO Max platform there. I haven't gotten into this show yet, but I'm going to. It's Raised by Wolves. Looks just plain crazy. It was developed and I think maybe directed and produced by Ridley Scott, who, of course, is known for his work with the Alien franchise and numerous other really top-notch movies, Blade Runner as well. So I'm looking forward to getting into that one. Haven't seen the debut episode yet, but I want to see where that one goes for sure. Something that I picked up also on HBO Max, just kind of by virtue of it floating around in some of the recommended areas, was this show called Primal, and it's an animated show done by Genndy Tartakovsky. If you're not familiar with that name and you were like me and you watched cartoons in the late 90s and whatnot, you should be, because he was the developer and the creative force behind things like Dexter's Laboratory, numerous other shows that were on Cartoon Network. And even, he was, I think, the movie, the Clone Wars movie that was produced there. He was very influential in the artwork and the artistic style of that. And really, going forward, just the artistic style of the Clone Wars period. And a lot of the stuff that got produced after that in terms of the actual Clone Wars series and everything else there. So Genndy is a really awesome storyteller, and Primal is a vivid example of that. Genndy also, if you remember Samurai Jack, Samurai Jack was my jam back in the day. Loved Samurai Jack. This is very similar to Samurai Jack in that it's kind of a revenge story, but it's also very awesome in terms of the fact that it follows this caveman who, of course, doesn't speak English. He only can sort of express himself by virtue of grunts and screams and this, that, and the other, and body language, of course, who goes through a terrible tragedy and is forced to align himself with a dinosaur. And it's them sort of going through life in these various stages. Very interesting thing. It's not just like him, it's not like the dinosaur becomes a puppy either. It's not his dog. It's got its own personality and its own, I'll say, interests and clauses and the whole 9 yards there. But very cool show, very bloody, visceral, and whatnot, and it really lives up to the name of Primal. But it's this amazing storytelling mechanism of it being really just a silent visual storytelling opportunity that Genndy has really expressed himself with here. Really just awesome stuff. Really well done. Couldn't speak more highly of it. The episodes are only about 25 minutes in length, so it's easy to get in and out with these. I want to say I think I'm on episode 3. This was released last year, actually, on Cartoon Network, but I think there might be 8 or 10 episodes. So I'm into the season and whatnot, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it all goes. I'm hoping it continues. I'd love to see more of it, but we'll have to see if the material here is just contained in one season or if it's going to be more than that. But Primal, definitely worth your time there as well. The other big thing in terms of TV watching that we got here this past week was the announcement that The Mandalorian Season 2 will debut on October 30th. Everybody, kind of had the nerdgasm moment there when they produced the graphic that announced that the show would be returning on October 30th. But then they're like, okay, well, can we have a trailer? Can we have a trailer now, please? We knew it was coming, but can we have a trailer? We want to see Ahsoka. We want to see Baby Yoda. It's one of those unfortunate things where it's almost going to turn out to where the main character, the Mandalorian, winds up being in a situation where he plays second fiddle to some of the subordinate cast members. I shouldn't say subordinate because Ahsoka, she's a major player in the whole Star Wars mythology now, and Baby Yoda, even though he's not done anything other than sort of be escorted around, he's in that same category, or I assume it's a he. But can you really tell with a member of his species when they're that age? No, not really. And that sack that the child is wearing is not really gender specific, so whatever. But still, people are really just chomping at the bit to get a trailer because they want to see live action Ahsoka. They want to see the Mandalorian again. They want to see, of course, Baby Yoda and all these other characters that have become a part of the vernacular of the Mandalorian. Will we get a trailer? Maybe, maybe not. I would really hope that we get one sometime soon because it would be appropriate. Not that you're not going to get people's appetite any more whet than it already is for the show. So is it necessary in being sort of needed? Maybe not. Would it be awesome to see regardless? Absolutely. So I think they probably will put one out here sometime soon. When, who knows? But I think it's coming. It's just a matter of when they decide to pull the trigger on it. Maybe this week, maybe next week. Maybe they'll do the smart thing and they'll say, okay, well, we're going to put this news out now where we are announcing the debut date, and then next month, if you're nice and if you play well, like a good little boy and girl, we'll give you the trailer at the start of October. Oh, we got to wait that long. Oh, yeah, you probably will. I just have a feeling they're going to stretch this along for as long as they can, but lots of stuff that's cool, lots of stuff that I would like to be watching and whatnot. It can't. But those are the shows that I'm really involved with at this point in time, and some stuff that I'm looking forward to as well. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there, and the streaming platforms really continue to be dominant, I'll say, in terms of my TV watching. I still watch stuff like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, that kind of thing, and Lord knows I'll never get away from Food Network. Love Guys Grocery Games and Triple D and all that stuff as well, but the stuff that I'm really latched into from a narrative standpoint is on the streaming platforms. So they're continuing to really knock it out of the park, and I'll continue to pay for them because of it. It is what it is. All right, folks, we're almost to the end of this episode, but we're going to come back here in a few after our next break with the traditional sign-off of What's Redbeard Drinking. Be back in a few, folks. Stay tuned.
I'm having trouble trying to sleep. I'm counting sheep but running out. As time ticks by, still I try. No rest for Christ stops in my mind.
Welcome back, folks. Appreciate you continuing to hang out with us here on the Weekly Trim podcast. And we are at the moment of the show where I get to have a beverage. And trust me, after an hour or so of podcasting, I am ready for a drink. And this week, we've got something that I'll say I've been kind of looking forward to because I saw it in one of our local stores here a couple of weeks ago. And I didn't have a chance to pick it up until just here within the past couple of days. So I've been holding on to it, been looking forward to this, and we're going to see what this is all about. And what we've got here this week is one of several different apparent opportunities or offerings, whatever you want to call it, from the Jack Daniels Corporation, if you want to call them that, in what they're calling Jack Daniels Country Cocktails. Now, this is one of those malt beverage deals to where this is a flavored beer, and it's described on the bottle as premium flavored malt beverage with natural flavors and certified colors added. So, of course, this says, okay, it's flavored one way, but we had to color it a different way to make it look like what we're saying it tastes like. But the variety that we have here this week is the Southern Peach variety, and there's no real description on the bottle or anything that I could find as far as the packaging is concerned. So we had to look up a little bit to see what the sort of official description of this thing is. And this is in the range of, I'll say, a wine cooler because it's 4.8% ABV, so not a big boy in terms of some of these other malt beverages where it's like your Four Locos and whatnot that wind up being around 13%. This is just 4.8, so much more easy to drink and not going to send you home hammered quite as quickly. But the description that I found online for this one reads as follows: the smooth and refreshing Southern Peach is the newest flavor of Jack Daniels Country Cocktails. Crafted in collaboration with singer Kay Michelle. I have no idea who that is. Southern Peach is perfect for light drinkers who are looking for a crisp and sweet beverage. I'm not a light drinker, I would say. So, one of the other things that this website that I'm pulling this off of, they're very quick to point out that if you're a Jack Daniels drinker and you're looking for something that tastes like Jack Daniels, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. So this clearly is not going to be something of that nature. But in giving this a full review, we're going to go ahead and pop the top off of this. This is a glass bottle, it's also a clear glass bottle. So even though as part of our reviews, we normally like to describe the color, aroma, all that kind of stuff about these, I can already tell you the color of this is. It's a translucent pink orange shade. It doesn't really look like the color of a peach. It's more of kind of like a really watered down Pepto-Bismol maybe. A little bit more orange than that, but still it's in that ballpark in terms of the color combinations that are here. I guess somebody thought this is peach. Yeah, sure, that's what a peach looks like. We can market that, sure. But I'm going to go ahead and unscrew this thing here, and we'll get into seeing what it actually comes across as far as the aroma and what have you. Well, I was expecting there to be some kind of a dramatic fizzy sort of sound whenever I opened that, but there was nothing at all. So I'm not sure how much carbonation this might have when we pour it. We'll see. Going to give it a pour here into our trusty glass. Wow. Well, we're pouring here as I'm describing this here, and I was really expecting there to be some sort of carbonation, but there is none. None to speak of whatsoever. That is plain peculiar. I really was expecting there to be some sort of carbonation to this, but there's not. That's a little bit disappointing. I will say that is a little bit disappointing. Okay, well, now that we've loaded into the glass here, the color, of course, has not changed. It's still that sort of translucent, watery Pepto-Bismol, as I described. A little bit more orange, actually, than that. Maybe... what's that? Dayquil? Yeah, watery Dayquil. Is that what we're going to go with here? Sure, why not? The color, it's not off-putting, but it's just kind of, it's not really what I would think of when I think of something that's peach flavored. So let's give it to the nose, and we'll see what we pick up here in terms of aromatics. That is very, as you would expect, very peach forward. It does smell like a peach. So if you're a fan of peaches, as I am, South Carolina actually produces, even though Georgia is called the peach state, South Carolina actually produces more peaches than Georgia does. So we should be the peach state, but whatever. The aroma here is very pleasant. Being a big fan of peaches as I am, this smells very good. I'm very pleased with how this came across. It's not very, pungent in terms of it hitting you particularly hard with the aroma of anything that, in some of these malt beverages, the aroma even is off-putting, more so than even the flavor of them, because that malt taste comes through more than anything else. But this smelled very nice. So we're going to go ahead and put it to the lips, and we'll see what this tastes like. Again, this is Jack Daniel's Southern Peach Country Cocktail. Here we go. Oh, man. This is a dangerous one right here, folks. This is very sweet and very much like an actual peach. I don't know where they came up with their combination of flavors for what they're going to wind up calling a peach in terms of how they create or recreate the peach flavor. They got it right. This is very good. Man alive, it's almost sweet along the lines of a cobbler, like a peach cobbler. But this, of course, doesn't taste like a peach cobbler. I'm just saying that, you think of desserts and how sweet a peach is. They've really captured that. They've got the great flavor of a fresh, juicy, succulent peach that's in this drink. And I complained about the lack of any type of carbonation. Now that I've had a taste of it, if there had been carbonation there, it would have thrown things off. It would have been a little weird. So that was a good decision on them. I'll give them credit where credit is due, because the lack of carbonation does help this. And the fact that I've got it good and nice cold is great as well there. As I've described before, when I do my reviews, I tend to put these things in the freezer for a little bit to get them nice and cold, because there's going to be a little bit of time between when I actually get to recording this segment of the show. So I want to make sure that they're good and cold when I get to them. But this really and truly, the initial taste, ooh, man. And you talk about easy to drink. And that's one of the things, some people would say this is too sweet. Too sweet. I had to throw that in there. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. This is the first drink I've had tonight, so you can't blame me there either. But just really something else in terms of how the sweetness is there, the flavor of the peach is there, and really easy to drink. Oh, man. But some people would say it's a little bit too sweet, I'd say. But, again, it's a difference of opinion, difference of what you might think and what you might favor in terms of what your, taste gravitates towards. Going to go for another sip here and see if there's anything else that we pick up about this beverage. And really and truly, with some of these malt beverages, you get that malt flavor, and to me, that maltiness is really off-putting. But that's not present at all here. And again, maybe it's because of how cold I've gotten it, but really and truly, this tastes great. I have no real issues with this whatsoever. Again, some people might think it's too sweet, but to me, this being a Jack Daniel's country cocktail, and knowing that this is representative of Southern culture to where we put literal cups of sugar in things like sweet tea, I would say this is probably really what it should be in terms of where it came from, what it's supposed to be, and what it is. So, yeah, this gets high marks. I'm definitely going to finish this one, and I've got 5 more. They're probably going to be done before the end of the evening here as well. So here's to Jack Daniel's for crafting the Southern Peach Country Cocktail. Definitely worth your time there. I'd say this is I'm not going to give it, extraordinarily high marks, because there's nothing really I'll say, profound about this, but it definitely, in terms of drinkability and quality and living up to the name of being a Southern peach flavored beverage, it's all there. So I'd give this 3.25 out of 5. Very good, very drinkable, very refreshing, especially something, on some of these hot days that we have here in the summer. This would really be a refreshing thing to have. You probably could even get away with pouring this over ice. Not, a whole lot, because it would definitely dilute this very quickly since it's only 4.8%, but still, if you wanted to keep it really cold, you could probably get away with putting this over ice. But yeah, 3.25, 3.75. That's my score for the Southern Peach from Jack Daniel's Country Cocktails. Folks, we appreciate you being a part of the show here and for tuning in and for continuing to rock out with us here on the Weekly Trim on the Rasslin Redbeard YouTube channel. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stuff that we're supposed to beg you as YouTubers and online influencers or whatever the hell you want to call us. If you would also be so kind as to wash your hands, wash your mask, and wear your damn mask, we'd appreciate it as well. Folks, it's been fun. I'll meet you further on up the road.